Hello and welcome to episode 83 of Can We Still Be Friends, a podcast that tests the limits of the friendship between two people who mistake movie taste for personal morality. I'm Nate Goss, here with Ryan Ebling. To say the least, a lot has changed since the last time we recorded. Our plan at the end of the last episode was to watch Bend It Like Beckham, but as with most things these days, those plans have been put on hold. Instead, we wanted to get together to check in and talk about what we've been watching now that we have all this time on our hands.
Nate and I wanted to get back together to share recommendations and talk about what movies and shows we're gravitating towards. Obviously, this is going to be a very different episode from our other ones, but we're hoping that in this time where we're all doing our part by staying apart, we can spend an hour or so talking about something that brings us together. So keep listening.
All right, well, welcome listeners to our very special episode, quarantine episode of Can We Still Be Friends? Ryan, you sound a little different. Do you have a cold or something? Or
I don't, actually. For once in my life, I don't have a cold or something. We're just not in the same room.
Yeah,
I'm leaning into my computer and hoping that my phone and Skype are picking up my voice well enough.
This is odd for us. I think we've talked a little bit in the past about just how much we are a podcast of routine.
Yeah.
We've changed very little since we launched this thing, like 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And yet here we are. This is our first ever time recording where we're not in the same room together, and it's a little weird.
That's pretty impressive, I think, to go 6 years without ever needing to record remotely. I guess if we had more of a schedule, we might have had to do that. But our routine does not involve a necessarily consistent schedule.
It's been a while. I mean, our last episode was March, our Mikey and Nikki episode.
Yeah.
So we skipped a month there. I think maybe just waiting to see how things were gonna play out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And we still don't really know at all how any of this is gonna play out.
No, I feel like every commercial reminds me, in these uncertain times. It's like, yeah.
I can hear the piano music now, and
so go ahead, Sharman. Tell me what you're gonna do for me.
Yeah, has that been fixed, by the way? I mean, I guess
the toilet paper thing.
Is that done? The toilet paper thing, or is that? I don't know. I mean, I should know. That makes me sound really unsanitary not to know that.
Yeah. Just to be safe, I've been wiping my butt in the backyard every time I poop. I've just forgotten to check at the grocery store. So Kelsey does most of our shopping. And she said that the last couple times she's gone, it's been there. But we actually were fine before we went into this. We didn't need to stock up or anything. So
they were all you had mounds of it in your bunker.
Yeah. So we haven't. Yeah, our kids have a bouncy castle, which is really just the basement's full of toilet paper rolls.
we were good for a long time because we had actually installed bidets on both of our toilets.
Oh, well.
So we were fancy fine, you know.
Wow.
We were good.
So in these uncertain times, have you had to let the butler go who dries your buttocks gently after you use the bidet? Or...
Yeah, he's still around. Well, I mean, we're not monsters. We like to make sure everyone's taken care of. It was like he was on the chopping block because we got the bidets, you know.
Right.
And then this happened.
Which is weird that you had a butler to wipe your bottom before the bidets.
Right. You know, it's funny that I'm glad to see that even though we're remote, we can still go way off on tangents, no problem.
Yeah, that's nice. It just shows you how uncertain these times are. I did not expect to be talking about toilet paper and your bottom at all tonight, let alone in the first couple minutes of the episode.
Right, and that's what makes it a very special episode.
If not uncertain.
Yeah. So. I mean, who knows where this episode's going to go? It's not following any of our normal routine. We don't even have a movie to talk about.
No, we don't.
I don't even know how much you've prepped for this episode.
Or a movie to pick.
Right. Well, how about this? So this is sort of a check-in. I think it can also be kind of a check-in with our listeners, as much as it is with the two of us checking in. So how have you been doing? That's a general question, but also just how have you been doing as it pertains to this particular podcast, as we talk about film and things like that?
Well, generally, I've been doing pretty okay. I mean, I'm a teacher, and so I think the hardest things have been adjusting to e-learning, which is really difficult.
Mm-hmm. It kind of sucks.
Yeah, and then just all the sadness around not seeing my kids, and I teach seniors mostly, so knowing how to help them deal with what they're missing out on, that's been the hardest part. Otherwise, as far as like being home with my family and everything like that, we're doing really well. I feel like we've kind of found a groove. I think at first it was a little weird having me home all the time. My wife is home with our kids all the time. We're lucky enough to be able to do that. So having me home throws off their rhythm.
Like, who's this interloper? Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. And, it's like, it can be hard for me to hear the kids melting down and not just go step in and know whether or not Kelsey actually wants that help or would she just rather So I feel like we've kind of established that rhythm better. And so being home has been really good because I feel like the time with my family has been really positive. And I don't know how many people, I guess I don't hear people say that a lot. So in some ways I feel bad saying that I'm really kind of enjoying this time, but I'm not going to take that for granted either, that of course there are things like I'm not worried about my job. I'm not worried about where my money is coming from. Those are things that will definitely make me able to have that freedom to enjoy what I can enjoy. So,
right.
And as far as the podcast, yeah, it's been hard. It's been hard too. It's weird to do this like this. I kind of am used to my routine of driving out to your place, like right. Kind of doing some pre-thinking that way, like whatever. And I think I miss watching a movie with a notebook open, like having at least one movie a month where I'm like, I'm gonna really think about this. So I've sort of tried to make that happen by picking movies that I've been meaning to watch or movies that are like a little bit more of a stretch for me, but that's not always. I don't always do that successfully. It was kind of tongue-in-cheek in the intro when we said what the movies we're watching with all this time on our hands, because it's one of like the paradoxes of this quarantine, I think, where I have all this time, but I'm also not doing as much as I thought I would do when I thought I would, like when in the past when I would think like, oh, if I had more free time, I would.
Yeah.
And now I've got all this free time and I'm not fully doing all that.
Doesn't quite work that way.
What about you? How have you been? How have you been thinking about the podcast or movies?
I ups and downs. So I'm in kind of the same boat as you are, where I'm a librarian. I'm not like a lot of people in this nation right now that are really anxious about where their income's going to come from, how they're going to make ends meet. I also don't know anybody who actually has, succumbed to COVID-19 or has it. So there's a little bit of a remove there in that sense. But that doesn't mean it's not heavy on my mind a lot,
right?
Or that it's not something that's kind of consuming my mind, as I'm sure is true with you too. So I think when it first started, it was hard to know how serious to take it at first. I mean, obviously we were taking it very serious. I mean, we were at home, right? But it was also kind of like, well, we'll figure something out, like we'll get back to work within a reasonable amount of time.
Right.
And then I used that time pretty well. Like I actually knocked out a bunch of movies in like the first week or two that I kind of wanted to see for a while and that I was excited to kind of catch up on. And also I work at the library. So once I kind of knew like the writing was on the wall that we were going to be closing, I just snagged a bunch of DVDs.
Smart.
So, and then I think just as the weeks went on, I've got my two boys who are in kindergarten this year, and the e-learning has been extremely difficult because they're kindergartners. They are not really wired for remote learning. And also, I am home. I do have a paycheck, so I can't complain about that. But my job is not the same working from home. No. And so I kind of miss my job. I miss what I really like doing at my job. And also there is this expectation that you are still going to work at home from home. So I've been doing a lot of that. So even though it's kind of like you were saying, you've got all this free time on your hands, but it's also in the back of your mind, you feel kind of guilty when you're not doing something maybe for work during like Monday through Friday, 9 to 5,
Right.
And then because we're doing e-learning, plus the working from home, plus my wife has a job. She's a reading specialist at an elementary school. And so she still has to work from home as well. Our days are really kind of busy with that kind of stuff. And then by the time nighttime rolls around, which normally was when I would have knocked out the movies I watch, it was getting harder and harder to do that. I was just kind of mentally and emotionally drained by that time.
Right.
I'm also not someone who has ever really worked from home, and also never took my work home with me like a lot of teachers do. So that's an entirely new balance for me. Like my home was always just either leisure time or doing housework. And so bringing work into this environment is kind of messing me up.
Yeah.
And so, like I said, I was doing really well for a couple weeks, and then I feel like something happened like a week or two ago where I just hit the wall. And there was a big long spell that, maybe didn't even break until maybe even today, where I finally watched a movie again. I seem to, like, somewhere along the way, completely lost my attention span. Like, whether I was reading, even listening to music, or trying to watch a movie or even a TV show, it's like I couldn't go longer than 10 or 15 minutes without immediately knee-jerk reaction pulling out my phone and wanting something to distract me from what was supposed to be a distraction to begin with. It's like I couldn't find the distraction that fit.
Yeah, right.
That makes it sound like it's all bad. There's been great things too. I'm trying to take advantage and really soak in this time where I get to spend a lot of time with my boys. It's weird because I think we both would kind of consider ourselves introverts. So this seems like it should be a really good fit. And I think what I found out about myself is that I'm an introvert that needs to be just around people. Like I miss the coffee shop environment. I miss the library environment. These environments where I wouldn't even be talking to anybody because I'm an introvert.
Right.
But there's something soothing to me about the presence of other people. And now when you go out, I'm the one that does the grocery shopping, and it's just a very isolating, lonely feeling.
Yeah, and going out, there's the presence of other people is a question mark. It's not like a comforting thing.
Right. Yeah.
If the grocery store's got more people than normal, you're not like, oh great, I'm soaking up this time with others. It's like, like,
what's going on? Yeah.
Who's not wearing a mask? Who's too close? I think one thing that is tough for me is just I don't get a lot of alone time. Like,
yes,
even if I tend toward introversion, but I'm not a full, like, I think very few people are full introvert, full extrovert,
right.
But like, even if it was just in a day, I had the 15-minute drive to work in the morning and the 15-minute drive home, it was like time by myself.
Yep, totally. Yep.
But that idea of loneliness and being alone and being around people, but like, it can feel really lonely to be in the house with 3 other people. Like, you're not alone. I'm not alone. But that can still feel lonely because there are times where we've had it with each other. But then none of the time alone is actually like fulfilling time alone. So I've been trying to like use gardening, I guess, as like that time where I spend a fair amount of time, like 10 minutes straight weeding. And I find like my mind just sort of wanders in really productive ways. And I think weeding is also just sort of a cathartic physical manifestation of like clearing my head.
A lot of metaphors working there.
Yeah. That's how I work.
And when it comes to the podcast, I miss it too, because I found out that even though we would only get together one night and we'd only watch one movie to talk about, I found that one movie kind of framed everything for that month for me. Like, it's the movie that I thought about kind of during the month. It's the movie that was the lens through which I watched every other thing I was watching. And then you find out how much you miss just having, even if it's just one person, having somebody that you can occasionally talk about movies with, because even though I've got this list here of movies I've watched, I haven't talked to anybody about them or even processed them with anybody else.
We said as we were planning this that we didn't want it to just be a downer. I think people are having this very same conversation left and right.
Yeah. So do they need it from us? Yeah, hard to say.
Yeah. So I do want to try to make this, even though I know you felt like you have your movie watching has dropped off, maybe instead of kind of like focusing on that, we can focus on when we were watching movies during this time, or when you were, what was like kind of getting you into it, and maybe just by talking about it like this, we can kind of get that like pump primed a little bit and share some recommendations, maybe like, what have you been gravitating toward? Is there a type of movie that when you want to watch a movie, is there a type of movie that has been kind of appealing to you? in these uncertain times.
Yeah, you know what's funny is I feel like most people would think that what they want now is escapism, and I find that's just not me. Like, I am totally fine with getting into a really heavy movie right now. You know, it's not a problem for me at all. I don't need to have something that's gonna necessarily perk me up. And a lot of times, if I watch a movie like that, it doesn't work anyways. So, what gets me excited is actually like seeing that movie that's been on my list forever. And I'm kind of like, you know what? I can just knock this out right now, and I'm going to do it. And then it was funny because I think I told you this. This was way early on during the quarantine. One of those movies for me was Dogtooth.
Oh, that's right.
Which I've seen quite a few of Yorgos Lanthimos' other movies. Just never saw Dogtooth, which seemed to be the one that kind of put him on the map for everybody else. They finally had it in the Criterion streaming channel, which, by the way, for me has been a lifesaver. I really love having access to that because so many of the boxes that I need to check off are in there.
I'm pretty sure that every movie I'm about to tell you about is off of Criterion channel.
Oh, awesome. That's awesome. It's funny because I find that the movie that I watched way early on in quarantine and the movie that I watched today are kind of bookends of quarantine movies in a way. Which is one that is a quarantine movie that you probably shouldn't watch during quarantine, and that's Dogtooth.
So Dogtooth, yeah. Just in case people don't know what Dogtooth is about, do you want to explain a little bit?
Oh my goodness!
Maybe in that explanation is the content of the movie a reason you would put it off? Because I know when I had talked to you about it was usually pretty like offering warnings about how insane this movie is. Yeah,
and it's weird because for me, that might even be an appeal factor.
Sure, yeah.
like how bad could it be, really? No, I didn't know hardly anything about this movie other than the fact that I know that the Film Spotting guys, who we listen to a lot, really like this movie. Mm-hmm. And that you and our friend Tim, who's been on the podcast, both had seen it, liked it, but liked it with reservations.
Yeah, it's the sort of movie I would never, ever in a million years recommend to another person.
Yes, you've got to know who you're talking to ever think to recommend something like Dogtooth, I think. Essentially, it's following these three teenagers, two sisters and a brother.
Teenagers or young adult? Like, aren't they in their 20s? Or are they that young?
I'm just going off the IMDb summary, but you're right. They could be early 20s. It's hard to kind of tell. I don't think the movie really says.
No.
You know, they're either like older teenagers or possibly in their 20s. And they live this isolated life that their parents have kind of made for them. It's just this super overprotective environment. And the parents, you never really get a sense of why they're doing it or what their motives are, but they kind of develop even their own language for things.
Right.
And that's kind of all you really need to know. But a lot of weird stuff kind of happens in the movie.
Violent, weird, sexual, weird, like just disturbing, but also kind of funny. Some of it. It was
definitely one of those where it's like, I can't help that I'm laughing at this. I don't know if I should be laughing at this.
Right.
You know, if you've seen other Yorgos Lanthimos movies like The Favorite or The Lobster, it's the same kind of tone where there is humor in it. You don't always know what to do with that humor.
Right.
And usually what you're laughing at is wildly absurd and oftentimes pretty violent.
Yep.
So yeah, that's Dogtooth. And I did really like the movie, but it was not a very good movie to watch during quarantine because essentially these three people are living a quarantined life and it is messed up. And I was at the beginning of quarantine and I was like, is this what we have to look forward to?
Right. Well, yeah. Are they in quarantine in the movie because they're messed up, or are they messed up because they've been in quarantine? That's kind of a disturbing question at the moment.
Exactly. So then as a parent myself of kids who I am forcing into quarantine,
right.
It's like, I got to make sure that I don't mess up my kids.
Right.
Maybe don't watch that one during quarantine.
Maybe not.
And then I don't know if I should talk about the one I watched today, which I think is a great movie to watch during quarantine. But I don't know if I should do that now, or I kind of want to hear what you've been watching as well that's gotten you really into movies.
Oh, well, okay, so unfortunately I got sick right at the beginning of quarantine. Not with COVID, though I was concerned about that because I had a fever.
You had all the symptoms.
I had a fever for more than a week, a bad cough. It was miserable. When I wasn't just kind of passed out from fever, I did watch a fair number of movies, and I did find myself drawn to escapist stuff. I couldn't be more shocked that my first pick, the first thing I watched, I think it was the first thing I watched, or it was at least the first thing I watched on quarantine, and I watched it on the Criterion Channel. It was Death Race 2000 from 1975. It's like a Roger Corman produced garbage movie about like this dystopian future in America where the most popular event is this death race, a cross-country death race. The racers are incredibly famous in America, though I don't know how famous you can get because only one person ever survives. I mean, there's a lot of holes in the movie, but...
Well, it's Corman, you know.
Yeah, Sylvester Stallone is in it. You know, the drivers get more points the more people they kill, and if you kill certain types of people, you get more points, and... it's basically like a kind of a bread and circus thing. Like they're being distracted so the government can control them. So there's like freedom fighters who are trying to use the race to make political statements and all that stuff. And then the main character played by David Carradine he's supposedly like the president's right-hand man, but he's also, you find out that he's actually trying to win the race just so he can kill the president. Although he's won the race several times before. Anyway, and interestingly enough, he's the president's right-hand man, and his right hand has been replaced with a grenade. I don't know. It's an insane movie. It was kind of refreshing to see what people thought the dystopian future in 2000 would be, and kind of be like, oh, that would be nice, actually. And then, so I was going for just sort of like, and I've never, even, you know, that's never my type of movie. Then, I don't know if it was like the next movie I saw, but I watched it around the same time, was the first Police Story, which is a Jackie Chan.
Oh, Jackie Chan, yeah.
Movie from 1985. And that was just a good time. Like, great action and actually very funny, but in a very, like, silly, kind of innocent, sweet sort of way. There's a love story and Maggie Cheung plays his girlfriend, and she is like, for an actress as talented as she is, it's really unfortunate what like the role she is given. But even their relationship is like, it's like a live action Looney Tunes. Like the romance is as complex and realistic as a Looney Tunes cartoon. Not like gross Pepe Le Pew romance, but just like, you know,
but like childishly simplistic.
Yeah,
romance.
absolutely. Yeah. But it was a fun movie. So I kind of found myself going for something that I could, you know, drift in and out of sleep during.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah.
But when I was awake, there wasn't a lot for me to be caught up on, and it was easy for me to get invested. Although I will say, I don't think I fell asleep during either of those movies. I may have watched them in chunks, but I remember them quite vividly. And another early one I watched was The Housemaid, which is a 1960 South Korean movie directed by Ki Young Kim. And I had seen Bong Joon-ho talk about it. I think Edgar Wright talk about it. Like, it was just a lot of filmmakers had cited that movie as an influential one. And it was one of Martin Scorsese's like world cinema remaster sort of things, like saving it. And there were even scenes where, like before the movie, they showed like there are going to be scenes where the only copy we had like original subtitles on it. So like there are scenes where you can tell like they had just one piece of film to pull from, and they used that. It was really good. It's from, like I said, it's from 1960, which is the same year Psycho came out, and it's certainly on the level of Psycho as far as like filmmaking ability, thriller, like some amazing shots. It's a really twisty sort of story with an ending that is crazy, but I'll say better than this ending for Psycho.
Wow. High praise.
Yeah, it was really good. It's about like a family who hires a housemaid, and she starts seducing the husband and taking over the family. So that was cool. It was, I guess I was watching a lot of genre stuff, which is not necessarily what I do often, but it is something that I want to do all the time. So I was, at least for a time, And I think it's still making good on some of my checking off the box sort of things.
What was the name of that movie again?
The Housemaid.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you even talk about taking over the family. I mean, that I could see definitely some inspiration in Parasite there.
Yes.
Have you seen a lot? Have you seen a lot of outside of Bong Joon-ho? Have you watched much Korean film?
No, not really.
Yeah, same here.
I've seen a lot of Bong Joon-ho.
So we both have a lot to catch up on.
Yeah, we do.
Korean cinema for sure.
But we have both seen Parasite, and Parasite's incredible.
Parasite is amazing. Yeah. Yeah, and I gotta say, as far as streaming platforms go, Hulu's been getting some awesome movies on there.
Yeah, they got Parasite, right? They got it before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Parasite's on there right now. If anyone hasn't seen Parasite, if you have Hulu, it's right there.
World cinema in general is a blind spot for me, which is it's a major blind spot to say. All but one country I'm quite familiar with.
I've done some catching up though this time with world cinema though.
I have too,
which has been great. I mean, that's the thing. It's always rewarding.
Yeah, and that's exactly.
And I don't know why I have to kind of push myself into it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what Bong Joon-ho said at the was it at the Oscars or the Golden Globes when he was accepting one of his awards. He said, "If you can get over that 1-inch hurdle, there's a lot of great stuff to see."
It's so true because I watched. I had never actually seen any Jacques Tati at all.
Oh yeah, I have. I think I saw like Monsieur Hulot's Holiday or something.
Okay,
but I really want to watch Playtime. That's like one of the next ones I want to watch.
Yeah, that's what I watched was Playtime. That's
cool.
The one that which I mean, it was great. It was a lot of like physical humor, also a lot of commentary on the modern world as it was in 1967. Just that sort of like
the hustle and bustle.
That or also just sort of like the standardization of everything and kind of the loss of the old Paris,
Yeah.
But then they have all these American tourists that are coming in looking for that old Paris, and it's just not there anymore. So I had never seen any Jacques Tati, and I watched Playtime. I guess I should have probably started with Mon Oncle. That Monsieur Hulot, who is Tati and kind of is the through line of a lot of these movies. He's obviously in Playtime, but I feel like I should have started with Mon Oncle because that's, I guess, where you get a little bit more used to the character itself. And then you see that commentary in Playtime that he's sort of playing with by using that character.
Yeah, Playtime's the third movie. I know I've seen Monsieur Hulot's Holiday, which is the first one.
But it was still great. I also watched this one. I think was on Amazon. I don't think it was on Criterion, but I watched Cinema Paradiso. It's a movie that's just actually about nostalgia, but just is so overflowing of nostalgia for an older Italy, really.
Yeah.
And also just for anyone who loves the movies and has a nostalgic feeling for the movies, you can really resonate with Cinema Paradiso. It's a super sentimental movie that might actually be a turnoff for some people, but I think I was just in the mood for it at the time. Like I could have used just some good old fashioned sappy sentimentalism.
Yeah. The other world movies I watched The Harder They Come, which is a Jamaican movie from 1972. And it stars Jimmy Cliff, who's a reggae musician. He plays a character who is trying to make it as a musician, and he records a song called The Harder They Come at this record studio. But the record studio head is kind of this like in with organized crime, and he kind of uses his stature to underpay and then not pay royalties on music for musicians. So he gets a lot of money.
When has that ever happened in the music industry?
Yeah, I don't know. This is just, a fiction story. And so right. Jimmy Cliff's character becomes like a gangster himself, thinking like, well, if this is the only way to make it, then I'm gonna enter this world. And he becomes pretty successful, but the powerful guy is not happy with him, and so he gets the police on his side, or he has the police on his side, and he becomes kind of like this folk hero fugitive kind of thing. And I've never really liked reggae, largely because the only reggae I had heard was Bob Marley, and that's fine, but it's I've heard it and it never really did anything for me.
Sure, I'm with you. I mean, it's weird. It's like I'll enjoy a Bob Marley tune well enough. Like if it's not the kind of thing I would like turn off. I'm never seeking it out.
No. And that was one of the really cool things about watching The Harder They Come is that it's partly about the Jamaican music scene. And so there's a lot of musicians featured in it and a lot of different songs. And I had no idea the breadth of what reggae could offer, especially Jimmy Cliff's, which is sort of like soul and reggae. And I like fell in love with it. And we've been in our house, we've been listening to Jimmy Cliff. I wouldn't say every day, but he's in like heavy rotation at our house now. The movie itself was pretty, it's a kind of a 70s run and gun movie. So not the greatest acting, not the greatest sound, not the smoothest editing, but, interesting.
I think that's always an interesting thing, though, is when you have those crossover things where like a movie actually introduces you to new music.
Yeah.
And then it actually makes you like the movie more, even though the movie might not be that great. But like, it's like you can't break away that tie it has to the music that it turned you on to. Yeah. So you end up having this really affectionate feeling for a movie that otherwise would be pretty run of the mill,
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening here. Are there other world cinema that you've seen?
Not world cinema, unless you want to call. I think this might have been the single movie that put me in my rut, but I wanted to watch it because I also, Anne, who's been on our podcast several times, she had that project where she watched every Best Picture winner of the Oscars. Yeah. And Criterion has this thing called the Saturday matinees, which are usually really great. Yeah. They're just like kind of like, good, entertaining movies to watch on a Saturday. And a couple weeks ago, their Saturday matinee was Around the World in 80 Days.
Oh, boy.
And I decided to watch it because they hadn't steered me wrong yet. I watched some really great movies with the Saturday matinees. Yeah. And it was one of those that was a Best Picture winner of the Oscars that I kind of wanted to just check off the list. Yeah. Of course, it was 3 hours long. I think actually more than that. But I was hey, I'm in quarantine. What else am I doing? Yeah. But my God, I think it took me close to 80 days to get through it. Hey-o. But seriously, I watched it in so many chunks. Like I could not watch more than like 10 minutes at a time of this movie. And it is awful.
Why didn't you give up on it?
I don't, just so I could check it off the list. That is my mind. My mind is like, I have to be able to say I saw it. That is seriously like the most colonizer version of world cinema. Like that is like, do you want the British American interpretation of what the world is back in the 50s? Well, there you have it.
I don't. I don't like that.
I just have to give you this anecdote. So the only female lead in this movie is Shirley MacLaine. I don't think it took me a while to even realize it was her. She plays Princess Ayuda, I think is how you say the name, but she's essentially a princess who is saved in India from being like forced married to an Indian prince and then sacrificed. I guess that's how the British saw India at the time. And so, of course, the British guy saves her. And of course, she's not even Indian. She's white.
But she's supposed to be Indian?
I think so. The movie never really makes it clear. But she's like in Indian garb the whole time. Like not just while she's in India, but like as the movie goes on. And she's supposed to be like an Indian princess.
I would have just taken it off my list.
That's all I'm going to say about Around the World in 80 Days. We don't need to waste any more of our time with it.
Well, I will say this. I'm looking... Shirley MacLaine was absolutely in brown face.
Yeah. The weird thing is the lighting in the movie is weird. I couldn't really tell if it was brown face or if it was just always dark, like when she was in the scene. Like dark as far as nighttime or whatever, you know?
No, I saw a picture. She was in brown face. Her eyebrows are darkened. It's,
not good.
That's terrible.
Not good. So that was kind of the unfortunate.
And that just like sapped your love of movies.
Yeah. Well, we were talking about world cinema. So the last piece I will talk about was actually what I was talking about, my bookend to quarantine. I had Dogtooth as like sort of the one not to watch during quarantine. Yeah. The movie that I watched today that I love it. I think it's a 5-star for me, honestly. Wow. Is have you seen Portrait of a Lady on Fire yet?
No, not yet.
Okay. They put it up on Hulu. Okay. And I was pretty excited because basically all the people I still follow for film really loved it. Like the film spotting guys loved it. Like Scott Tobias loved it. I think Tasha Robinson loved it. Michael Phillips loved it. And man, it is such a good movie. I think there's a lot of comparisons that could be made to other movies. Like you could compare it to like something like Call Me by Your Name. In the way that it's kind of this romantic love story in a time where that type of love wouldn't be accepted socially. It evokes a lot of like Jane Campion's The Piano. It's got direct references to it at the very beginning. But I think the whole movie sort of has that tone to it, that poetic, gorgeous, lush period piece thing going for it. It's one of those movies where you watch it for a while and you're like, it's good. I don't have any problems with it. But what's everybody seeing in this movie? And then there's like sort of a coda at the end, and I'm not going to spoil anything about it. But I can just say that the last scene of that movie, I can't shake it. It is such a good movie. The way it plays with the sort of Orfeo and Eurydice myth, it's got so many layers to it that are just beautiful. And the fact that it is about a painter, you know, who's sort of been assigned to paint this subject brings in a lot of layers about just how we look at things. And the reason I was going to say this is a great one to watch for quarantine is because of the story, which is essentially that this painter has been brought to this estate in France to paint this woman who she's arranged to marry someone in Milan. And this portrait is supposed to be painted of her for her future husband. And it's really just about this painter's relationship with this woman that she's supposed to paint. And so you just have quarantine in itself because it's a very secluded estate. There's really only her and the woman she's supposed to paint and another servant who's there. A lot of other people kind of leave for a while and there's really no one else around. So it's a very isolated environment. And there's even when it's windy outside and they go for walks, they wear scarves around their face that resemble the masks that we all wear now.
Wow.
And so a lot of it is her having to look at this person while she's wearing this quote unquote mask. And it's all about how not just these two women, but also the servant girl who's with them, they sort of bond and create this special quarantine style relationship. And maybe that's why it hit me a little bit. You know, it really made you kind of think about the people that you are in close quarters with all the time and how you look at them and the way you perceive them. And are you actually looking at them?
Yeah.
You know, it's a beautiful, gorgeous movie. I can't recommend it highly enough. And it just came out in 2019. So it's really, you go through those spurts where you kind of lose faith in cinema. Like, I don't know if you go through that as well, where it's like, can movies still do things? You know, can they still?
Yeah.
Because you get in these ruts and you watch a lot of older movies that move you, and then you're kind of like, well, what's going on these days? You know, and we had a great year last year with movies, with Parasite and Knives Out and Portrait of a Lady on Fire, but it had been a while, and I was just really thankful for this movie. It came at just the right time for me.
That's great. I've been wanting to see that, so now I'm especially excited.
Anything else for you, though? Because I think we were actually talking a while ago about how you were watching some Bogdanovich. Or no?
Well, yeah, I've got a couple more world movies to talk about before we
go
move
ahead.
into that, because that's actually kind of its own category for me. But I watched another Yasujiro Ozu movie called Good Morning. I mean, it is the opposite of Death Race 2000 or Police Story. It is just this really like gentle, delightful movie about life in Japan. And I wish I knew more about the circumstances surrounding it, because it seems like it's kind of like a specific sort of community that they live in. But basically there's some like light gossip around the area that causes a little bit of tension, but then the main sort of drama, if you could call it, of the movie is these two little boys, these two brothers, are demanding that their parents buy them a television, and their parents say no, and the boys refuse to talk until their parents buy them a TV. It's funny in really unexpected ways. Like for a 1950s Japanese movie by Ozu, a lot of fart jokes, but like they're really pretty. They're really funny. Like for some reason, the boys and their school friends have this game where they push on each other's foreheads. It's basically pull my finger, but it's pushing on the forehead. And like the kids are just trying really hard to be able to fart on command. The thing is, it's just like a part of the movie that like keeps coming up in funny ways in this this sort of like beautiful, quiet Japanese movie. There's these boys trying to fart on command, and one kid keeps trying so hard he shits himself every time.
You knew that was going to happen.
And like his parents are like worried about him, but super annoyed that because he won't tell them why he keeps having accidents. And one kid's dad farts a ton. And every time he farts, his wife comes in and says, "Did you call me?" And one time he just farts and she says, "Did you call me?" And he tells her something. Like he didn't call her, but he did realize he had something to say. So she comes and he just tells her anyway.
Might as well use it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. Not what I would have expected with Ozu. I think the only Ozu I've seen is Tokyo Story.
Tokyo Story, yeah.
not would not have belonged in that movie.
No, it's like, and the boys are just really funny, but there's also like a serious side of it because the boys are saying adults talk all the time and they never say anything. So they're like getting at the parents for their small talk, but also their gossip and the way they're not using language in any effective way. So they're refusing to talk, but they're doing it so that they can get a TV, not to make like some big point. And then it just is sort of like this really sweet movie about community as well. And then maybe that's a great quarantine movie too. Like in living in close quarters, there are these tensions, but there's also these ways that we kind of look out for each other and that we like, no matter what, we're going to be there. So I would definitely recommend that. I watched that on Criterion Channel. Then the other one, I've been meaning to watch movies by Max Ophuls. He's a French director. Mm-hmm. The movie, The Earrings of Madame de...
That's such a good movie. Did you watch that?
No, I haven't seen that. I want to. I know like P.T. Anderson like claims it as or cites it as an influence. But I watched his movie called Le Plaisir, which translates to Le Pleasure, and just like Mon Oncle, they won't translate it for us, so we have to say Le Plaisir. It's 3 different stories written by Guy de Maupassant. And I loved it. I mean, the filmmaking blew my mind. For 1952, the last shot of the movie, to tell you what the shot is would completely ruin the story because it's so vital to this story. But I have no idea how he did it. And actually, the second story of the movie, I have no idea how he shot most of that. Going up and down outside 2 or 3 stories of a building and in and out of windows and knowing how big that camera equipment was, I have no idea how he pulled it off. But it was just really beautifully shot, really great mix of kind of like funny storytelling with some pretty heavy themes and really like good use of drama when he needed to. I've seen his name around. It was the first time I'd seen one of his movies, and I was really, really glad I did. So that's actually good for us. A lot of world cinema, a pretty good list in the last 2 months. So
were there any other movies that were like just kind of really memorable watching experiences for you, I guess? Well,
so Kelsey and I watched A Room with a View together. I had seen that a long time ago. And I did not remember just how friggin' funny it is. Daniel Day-Lewis is in it as this miserable, like horrible person. Yeah. And he's incredible. Like, he's so funny. And it was just cool to see Helena Bonham Carter and Daniel Day-Lewis so young and really having fun with a movie that I would have expected to be like some of the most boring of masterpiece theater. Yeah. Sort of like costume drama type stuff. Yeah. Pretty dry stuff. But yeah, I actually watched that movie. It wasn't that long ago. I think it was like 2 years ago. I watched it for the first time. And Helena Bonham Carter's great. You know, I wouldn't loan her an umbrella, but yeah, she's great. Yeah. But other than that, it gets back to what you kind of teased a little bit, the Bogdanovich thing. For some reason, I've been drawn in the last couple weeks to 70s cinema. 70s cinema is sort of comfort viewing for me. I can see that. There's something about the style of clothes, the style of filmmaking, the style of acting that just sort of like, you know, that golden age of American movies is some of where I really started watching movies and finding my love for movies. So filling in the gaps, you know, I'm not watching The Godfather or Chinatown or, you know, Scorsese movies. I'm kind of going a little bit deeper for me. That is the stuff I hadn't seen, but I think it kind of gets me back to what got me into movies in the first place. What got me really excited was exploring that sort of stuff. I feel like, and this is something that I realized even today just watching Portrait of a Lady on Fire, where it's like I missed just bold moves in cinema. Like, and 70s cinema is just so filled with that, you know, because it's sort of that new Hollywood, but really the flourishing of that. And just giving these directors that were willing to just take these risky steps with cinema, risky stories to tell, but then also the studios giving them lots of money to do that. Right. And especially if you're a cinephile that grew up kind of as we did, whether you know it or not, you're really informed by a lot of 70s cinema, I think. Yeah. I'll save my Peter Bogdanovich 70s movie for last so we can talk about him. I know that you've got things to say about him. Sure. But I kind of kicked it off with Murder on the Orient Express, directed by Sidney Lumet. I don't know why I put that one on. I put that one on when I was sick. It was one of the Criterion Saturday matinee ones. I really liked it.
It's on my list to see, especially now, because it's funny you mentioned Sidney Lumet. I had never seen Dog Day Afternoon, and that was one that I caught up with during this time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so we can talk about Sidney Lumet a little bit too.
Yeah, I guess so. Those are two very different movies.
Well, for sure. I'm assuming, because I haven't seen Murder on the Orient Express, but
I mean, they both kind of have their sense of humor. But yeah, I really liked it. One of those like massive casts, everybody gets to come in and chew the scenery for a little bit, and then probably like the strangest one of the 70s movies I watched was Eyes of Laura Mars, directed by Irving Kershner, who went on to direct Empire Strikes Back. And it was written by John Carpenter.
Well, that's an interesting match right there.
Yeah. So it's sort of John Carpenter's take on the Italian giallo movies, like the psycho thriller sort of movies. And it's Faye Dunaway and Tommy Lee Jones. And she's this photographer who takes these very violent and kind of sexy pictures, and she's very controversial. But she keeps having this thing where she's seeing through the eyes of a murderer as the murderer kills people. And the murderer is killing people close to her. For what it was pretty good. Like, it's definitely, it's high 70s fashion, high, like, schlocky sort of filmmaking, and some good 70s psycho stuff. Understanding of the way psychosis and multiple personalities work and all that. I also watched 3 Days of the Condor, directed by Sidney Pollack, Robert Redford, and Faye Dunaway again.
That's a 70s cast if I ever thought of one.
Yeah. And, Sidney Pollack's not in it, but it's like a conspiracy theory, sort of. Not conspiracy theory, but like definitely like paranoia. Robert Redford is part of a secret government agency that gets shot up, and he's trying to figure out who's behind it, and some people in the government are behind it, and all that. So it was kind of a fun, complicated spy sort of movie. So yeah, I was on a real 70s trip, and in there was a movie that it's not 5 stars, but it was so fun to me, and it made me, if not that same day, the next day, want to watch it again. And that was What's Up, Doc, directed by Peter Bogdanovich. It's Barbra Streisand and Ryan O'Neal in the style of a screwball comedy. And I just thought it was great. Again, like, as far as stuff that like makes you kind of fall in love with cinema, it was as much a great entry of a screwball comedy as it was a love letter to screwball comedies, and an update on them and a better version of a lot of them. And Ryan O'Neal is doing a pseudo Cary Grant impression, and Barbra Streisand is not somebody who I've seen in a lot of movies. If that might have been the first Barbra Streisand movie I've ever seen. But she, kind of like Cher in Moonstruck, she is a performer, and she has this electric magnetism that just like is perfect for that role. And I didn't expect to really find it funny, because sometimes those classic comedies are classic because of how funny they were at the time, and it was tapping into something, and maybe they've been imitated or whatever and done to death. But it felt really fresh, the comedy of it. And a lot of that has to do with Barbra Streisand's ability to just be like rapid fire with the delivery. As far as like an update on Katharine Hepburn or something, she was perfect. I would absolutely recommend What's Up, Doc.
It's something that is that on the Criterion channel? Is that where you watched that one? I
watched it there. Yeah, I don't know if it still is. It should.
I'll have to check it out. Yeah, screwball comedies are something that I've always struggled with. Like, Bring Up Baby or His Girl Friday. I just can't. I don't know what it is. Even the Cary Grant Hepburn thing. I just can't seem to really get into it.
No, I know. I couldn't either.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned. Yeah, so Bogdanovich, I've wanted to get more into now, especially because TCM just put out their first podcast, and it's called The Plot Thickens, and it's a whole podcast season about Peter Bogdanovich.
Right.
He's like 80 now, and he's interviewed through the whole thing. And it's going through his entire life story. And you mentioned Roger Corman earlier on, and Bogdanovich got his start with Corman.
Yeah, he directed Targets.
And he became a protege of Orson Welles. He got to speak with Hitchcock a lot. So it got me really interested in Bogdanovich in general. And then on Criterion, one of their Saturday matinees, once again, was Paper Moon, which has been on my list forever, but for whatever reason, never appealed to me enough to actually start watching it.
Yeah.
But I gave it a shot. And, if you are looking for something that's just a light, fun movie, it's great. Tatum O'Neal as sort of the daughter, like she's a kid in this movie.
Right.
And she is so good as just this sort of streetwise Depression era.
She's incredible. Wasn't
grifter.
she nominated for an Oscar for that?
Yeah, I think she won too, I want to say.
Oh, yeah.
But it's great. And I don't know that I ever really put together that was Bogdanovich,
Yeah.
And
well, he's got so many different styles and genres. I mean, that's a black and white Dust Bowl comedy.
Right.
It's almost like It Happened One Night, but with like a father-daughter rather than a man and a woman.
Yeah, I could see that. It's just like one of those things where we're talking about 70s cinema, but Bogdanovich was so informed by classic cinema.
Yeah.
He was so informed by guys like Capra or guys like Howard Hawks or, or Ford. These guys that basically were just hired Hollywood studio directors that could do anything.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of what Bogdanovich took, is just this ability to, you want a good romantic comedy? I can do that. You want a good thriller? I can do that. You want a good, just feel good, like father-daughter type relationship thing? I can do that as well. He's like pulling from so many of these classic directors and just using all of their tricks. If you listen to the podcast, one of the tricks he learned from John Ford was he would have the actors rehearse all the way up to the big dramatic moment and then stop them. And then he would wait till they actually rolled the film to let them actually just release all that emotion naturally and then get that and then just get it on the first take. And it's just little tips like that you get from The Plot Thickens when you listen to that podcast about Bogdanovich that just make you realize, first of all, just kind of how brilliant he was as a filmmaker in the 70s.
Yeah.
But then also, like, he was only brilliant because he borrowed from so many people before him and was willing to just listen to what they were doing and build on top of that and synthesize it into something completely unique and new for him.
Yeah, I agree. I listened to a couple episodes and I don't know why I haven't sought him out more. I feel like he's just kind of one of those that's always been around, so I don't really think about him.
Right. I probably know him more as the guy who does a lot of the intros to the Criterion movies back when I used to get the DVDs. He would do so many of those and he was always so great. Like he just knew what to kind of pull apart and have you look at,
Yeah, no, he's really fun to listen to on that podcast too. I forgot one that I saw because I remember when I was talking about Murder on the Orient Express, I was thinking I've seen a lot of train mysteries recently, and so I had forgotten that I had also watched Hitchcock's The Lady Vanishes, one of his movies he made when he was still working in England rather than working in Hollywood. And I was surprised at how good that was, like really entertaining. In some ways, it's kind of like a goofy movie, like it's kind of funny. It's not like the Goofy movie. I don't see like a lot of references. There's a good companion
to the Goofy movie.
To the Goofy movie. No, it's just there are some like I never think much about Hitchcock's ability to be funny, and that movie was like in a lot of ways showed a side of him that I was really grateful to be able to see. Because the mystery is really good, and it's got, there's not as much of a thriller thing. It's just sort of a mystery and sort of like that would be so creepy if that happened to you sort of thing. But yeah, that was a really fun movie too. I actually kind of started it saying to myself, like, if I don't like this, I'll turn it off. But it just got me. I really enjoyed it.
That's great. So one last thing as far as movies during quarantine that I want to talk about that was just a great experience for me was that I actually showed my boys E.T. for the first time. And it had been years since I watched that movie. And man, does that movie hold up.
Yeah. I haven't seen it in a long time either.
It is so good. But the one thing I realized this time is I don't know how good that movie would be without John Williams. He's John Williams. So, I mean, he deserves a lot of credit for creating the soundtrack of our lives, essentially. But I don't know that there's any movie where he's doing as much heavy lifting as he is in E.T. Like he is really taking that movie to another level. I think that movie could have just been a decent family alien relationship movie.
Which that is a genre.
But the John Williams score, it just pulls on those heartstrings in just the perfect way. And the bike scene is still incredible, when he's flying on the bike with E.T. in there and flying over the moon. But try watching that without the soundtrack and have it be even remotely as impactful as it is. And it just doesn't work. It's everything working together with that movie. And that's not a knock against Spielberg or the screenplay or anything. It's just, it's an example of how movies, they need those
everybody.
Ingredients. They all have to be there. And also, I don't know if all this quarantine was just so I could see the kind of look of wonder on my boy's face watching the ending of E.T.
That's awesome.
It was such a great parenting moment of just sharing that movie with them. So,
well, I'm pleased with how this went. Who knows if people will find it enjoyable?
But I'm going to edit it down to something they have to enjoy.
Yeah, good. But I've got more movies that I want to watch now, so that's always good. And
same here.
Thankfully, most of what we talked about is streaming. Maybe unfortunately for you, or fortunately for you, because it'll compel you to get a Criterion Channel subscription. A lot of what we talked about was there. But I think for me, one of the things that's nice about Criterion Channel is that there aren't TV shows on it. And so when I'm browsing that website, it's not like, so, which happens with Netflix and Hulu and anything else. I just think like, I could watch a movie or I could watch a TV show. So I think that's one of the more positive things. And we are not being paid to say that, though maybe we should get in touch with Criterion Channel too.
We should, for sure.
Until they pay us, we're not going to continue praising Criterion.
Yeah.
I mean...
they're fine.
I think we're absolutely best buds because we are being what we need in this these uncertain times, and I appreciate being able to talk about this stuff with you. And maybe you've been longing for this sort of conversation too. So listening to this episode was good. If you've got your own recommendations, we would love to hear them.
For sure.
I'm accidentally jumping to the end, a banterless end, like talking about where people can reach out to us. But we don't have a movie to talk about. We don't know.
No, that's the thing.
We don't know what's up next.
All tradition is out the window.
Yeah,
this episode.
I mean, this is who knows the world we're going to be returning to, or
we're in uncharted territory. I don't think we really know what our next episode will be. It could be another check-in like this, or it could be we're back to doing movies in the same room.
We will let you guys know, obviously, through our various social media channels and everything.
Yeah.
So that's going to be important. In these uncertain times, we need the certainty of social media, and
that's right.
We'll be posting any new information there, and you guys can post information to us if you've got movies that you've been watching. What types of movies are you drawn to? What's bringing you comfort in these uncertain times? And you can find us on Facebook, Can We Still Be Friends Podcast. Find us on Instagram, Can We Still Be Friends Pod. My mic did not cut out. That's how you.
Right. There's no cast in there. Just pod.
Just pod. Our website is always open. Well, it's open for curbside pickup. CanWeStillBeFriends.net. And our email is closely related. Feedback at CanWeStillBeFriends.net. You can always send us an email or record a voice message and email us there, or in these uncertain times, you've got the certainty of the phone number and the certainty that neither of us know that phone number without looking it up.
All right, I'm going to look it up right now. That is sort of a comfort to me that hasn't been lost in this episode, is that having to look this up. Give us a call. That'd be great. The phones don't seem to be going anywhere anytime soon.
No.
So give us a call at 847-306-9532. Our operators are not standing by, though. We have sent them to work
they're working
from home. Be prepared for the automated message, unfortunately, instead of getting a nice, friendly operator on the end.
Yeah. But, we're keeping them safe. Their family's safe.
Yeah. And actually, I don't know, I just want to actually thank anybody who's listening to this, because I don't know if you're like me, Ryan, but my podcast listening has gone down.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Because I just don't have a commute anymore.
Right.
And I don't have those moments of alone time to sit with a podcast.
Yeah, maybe washing dishes or something. I can listen to it. But yeah, if you are listening through these uncertain times, thank you.
We made this work.
Yeah. We did.
So that was a little bit of a load off. I got to be honest, it was kind of in the back of my mind, like, for like a month now, like, how is this going to work?
Yeah.
And we figured it out.
Well,
so
we need to find the things that we can cling to, even in these uncertain times, as our routines are done away with. I'm drinking High Life this evening.
You know what's funny is I switched to a whiskey.
I thought
tonight,
that's what that was.
And I'm definitely feeling it. I'm not as sharp at this point in the night as I normally am. Not that I'm ever really sharp. That's
I mean, I think you'll find when you go to edit this that you've fallen asleep a couple times now, and I've just sat here waiting for you to wake up.
Right.
But I at least kept up my side of the routine.
You did. Thank you for keeping
so
this
a little bit of certainty for these uncertain times.
Right. If there's anything we could be certain of,
these times are uncertain.
It's the uncertainty of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. If there's anything that we can hold on to as sort of our core,
it is the
uncertainty.
It's these times. Yeah.
It is that we have no idea what's going to happen. So hold on to that. I can't wait for being able to just talk about a movie again with you. It'll be great. In a room.
Yeah, in the same room. Yeah.
So, but this was good too. I'm really happy we did this, and it was fun. And I'm glad that cinema has kind of kept us, the glue that has kept us together. In these uncertain times.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's a good point. These times are uncertain, and I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah,
it's good to acknowledge that.
When all certainty is lost.
Yeah.
Cinema will keep us together.
All right. Well, thank you again for listening, and we will catch you sometime.
Yeah, that sounds good. We'll see you guys later. Thanks for listening.